listener production.
Hi, Sasha Barbagat with you. Welcome to The Briefing. There are plenty of good reasons for going vegan or vegetarian. The animals, the environment, health, the cost of a steak. But 1 in 10 Aussies is actually eating more meat now, or planning to, than in previous years. So why?
Everyone was shook that I started eating meat again. So I guess it was part of my identity. If everyone was shocked when I, ate a chicken. But then I found out, meat tastes good.
Our explainer on why some people are abandoning plant-based diets and what you can do to get the nutrients you need if you decide to go vegan in 2025. That's coming up in the second half of this episode. First, though, time for the headlines with Chris Spiru. It's Thursday, December 19.
Morning, Sash. Morning, everybody. Foreign Minister Penny Wong has announced Australia will reopen its embassy in Ukraine's capital of Kyiv following its evacuation in 2022. The embassy has remained closed since that time, and that was shortly after the war began when the Morrison government ordered embassy staff to relocate to temporary offices in Poland due to increased risk. And that was an arrangement that has continued under the Albanese government until now. Senator Wong made the announcement last night whilst in Kyiv, saying from next month, Australia's ambassador and his staff would return and the embassy will be fully operational.
We always said we would do so when it was safe to do so. We have been working to re-establish the security arrangements to enable this to happen, and I'm very pleased to be here to announce the reopening of the Australian Embassy.
The coalition has been critical of Labor's call to leave the embassy closed, with 70 other nations already reopening theirs. And while visiting Kyiv, Australia also committed to additional aid, bringing our total support to over $1.5 billion since Russia's invasion almost 3 years ago, Sash.
Yeah, meantime, Penny Wong's office has responded to reports of a sharp verbal clash with Israel's new foreign minister. So according to Israeli media, a phone call between Senator Wong and Gideon Saar quickly turned when she said Israel was not supplying enough humanitarian assistance to Gaza. Australia was accused of weakening its support for Israel, which was a clear reference to recent votes for a permanent ceasefire at the UN. Also, the recent anti-Semitic attack on a Melbourne synagogue was reportedly mentioned. Now, Senator Wong's office has since issued a statement describing the call as direct but respectful. It went on to say that Wong did convey Australia's commitment to countering anti-Semitism and hate in all forms. And Chris, it is worth noting the paper making these reports, it's called Hayom. It is known to support Benjamin Netanyahu's agenda.
Australian Air Force planes have started arriving in Vanuatu, stocked with personnel and supplies. Among those on board, firefighters, paramedics, volunteer engineers, canine handlers and doctors who will assist local workers in the aftermath of Tuesday's 7.3 magnitude earthquake.
I also want to make clear that this is just our initial response. Our expectation is that more help will be requested and more help will be provided.
Treasurer Jim Chalmers there. At least 14 people have been killed and more than 200 injured after the disaster, which has flattened buildings and destroyed critical infrastructure around the capital, Port Vila. A second powerful tremor measuring 6 was felt yesterday morning as a 7-day state of emergency was declared. 3 planeloads of Australian aid and personnel have been sent to assist.
Meantime, still in the Pacific Islands, we have got an update on that poisoning case of 4 Australians at a resort in Fiji. The country's Deputy Prime Minister says no methanol or illicit drugs have been found in toxicology tests of the cocktails that the group had been drinking when they fell critically ill. But it has still not been revealed what caused them to get sick. In good news, though, all of them have now been released from hospital. Now, it was quite interesting listening to the Deputy Prime Minister because he brought up the tourism aspect and the fact that he didn't want people to be scared of coming to Fiji. 1 million people visit the small island nation every year, including 500,000 Australians. So Australians make up half of all those tourist numbers. And the Deputy PM in his press conference said, "I would like to tell everyone it is safe to come to Fiji. We have to also find out who has been giving out that negative press on Fiji as a destination." So implications there that he thinks a neighbour was trying to undercut Fiji tourism by saying, oh, maybe it's not safe. So he doesn't mention a country by name, but I just found those comments noteworthy.
After years pushing for it, pill testing advocates in New South Wales have had a win, with the state government confirming a trial will go ahead. It'll last 12 months and see punters at music festivals able to submit their drugs for testing. The trial will begin in time for the 2025 summer festival season and will be formally announced today. Last October, the Minns government rejected calls to introduce pill testing after the deaths of 2 young men. A recent drug summit had also called for New South Wales to follow the ACT and decriminalise drugs. That move has been shot down by the Health Minister.
Yeah, and it's worth noting Queensland is the only state that has actually established permanent pill testing clinics. They did that back in March. The ACT, which of course is a territory, not a state, established one in 2022. And remember those 2 astronauts who ended up stuck on the International Space Station? Well, they have just found out that they are going to be up there a while longer. Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore became stranded back in June after travelling to the ISS for a brief mission on a Boeing Starline capsule. But safety issues with that craft meant that they couldn't return to Earth on it, and their 8-day stay turned into an 8-month visit with a NASA Crew 10 mission due to arrive in February 2025 to take them home. Now, that mission has been delayed until at least the end of March, which means Williams and Wilmore will remain on the ISS until then. Now, I have watched some media with them that they've done in the past. They haven't spoken yet at the time of recording, and they're trying to put this positive face on. They're like, it's fine, it's all good. Yeah. I thought I'd take you through some straight facts on what it's like to live on the ISS. Now, they are trained professionals. They have all the support in place. But keep in mind, when you are preparing your body and your mind to go into space for 8 days and it turns into 9+ months, you can imagine that the effect could be negative, right? So on the ISS, you orbit the Earth every 92 minutes and you experience near weightlessness, right? So that means there are no fridges, there's no refrigeration. You can only eat vacuum-packed foods. There are no showers or toilets with water, so astronauts use rinseless soap and shampoo, and they spit their toothpaste into washcloths. The crew also has to use special toilets which have leg restraints and a vacuum for waste.
This is terrible.
Crew members have to exercise for more than 2 hours a day to counteract the loss of muscle and bone mass, which is caused by living in microgravity. Okay. Spaceflight also decreases humans' immune systems and cardiovascular health, and the psychological impacts are very possible. Consider living in confinement and isolation for that amount of time. Of course, like I said, NASA gives them the appropriate supports. But if you're prepping for an 8-day mission, it turns into a 9-month mission, it would be quite difficult to deal with. Most crews as well spend about 6 months working on the ISS. These 2 are going to be up there for 9+ months. Yeah. So spare a thought for Sonny and Butch. They're going through it. They are remaining positive for now, and, you know, they will be okay and they'll get back to Earth safely. But yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember last month when those pictures came out where we saw Sonny, like how much her face had changed. She appeared really gaunt, but she came out at the time to say that she's in good health and no one needs to worry. She's the exact same weight that she was. I mean, it's terrifying. Me and you, we always talk about whether or not we'd go to space. This to me is just like a cautionary tale against that. I mean, I'm still passionate about it, can't afford it. But if anyone out there wants to, you know, donate us a trip to space, I don't know, we'll consider it in the new year.
You can be our roving reporter. I'll stay here.
Absolutely. I actually love that. Sign me up.
Chris, thank you so much for being here for the headlines. Next up, we are getting into our deep dive looking at why more Aussies are turning to meat at the moment.
Hey, Bension here. There are lots of very compelling reasons to cut meat and dairy out of our diet. For one, we cannot keep cutting down old-growth forests for farmland in a climate crisis. Just ask documentary maker David Attenborough.
The planet can't support billions of large meat eaters. There just isn't the space.
Not to mention cruelty to animals. Just ask Billie Eilish.
Even though I have lots of friends that eat dairy and meat and I don't want to ever tell anybody what to do, I just can't go on in my life knowing what's going on in the animal world and like not doing anything about it.
Don't even get Natalie Portman started on the waste and pollution of industrial agriculture.
Factory farming is responsible for most of the air, water, lands pollution that disproportionately affects our poor communities as well.
And if you ask Australian cricketer Jason Gillespie, veganism boosts your health.
I've never felt healthier in my life. I played cricket for, over 15 years as a professional and, I feel really strong now.
But some Australians have been there, done that, and found, despite all the compelling reasons to go vegan or plant-based, the cons for them personally have outweighed the pros. Data from a nationally representative survey by the alternative protein think tank Food Frontier this year found that fewer people were planning to reduce meat consumption this year than 2021, and 1 in 10 had actually increased their meat consumption or were planning to. So why are some people, especially those who were once committed vegans or vegetarians, bringing meat or dairy back into their diets? Melbourne doctor Finn Shelton became a vegetarian as he was growing up in Hobart and stayed that way for 12 years until this year.
I had started a new full-time job and I was very busy. I didn't have time to eat a lot, so I lost a bunch of weight really quickly. And then I thought, it'd be a really easy way to eat protein is if I actually ate meat for once. I like tofu, but I don't like it that much. I don't like seitan. I think that stuff's disgusting. And then beans and lentils and stuff, I feel like you have to eat quite a bit of it to get the same amount of protein in. Everyone was shook that I started eating meat again. So I guess it was part of my identity. If everyone was shocked when I, ate a chicken. But then I found out, meat tastes good.
Sarah Bowl, who works as a digital community engagement manager, had been a vegetarian for about a year. Then she found out she was having a baby.
So I would just go to the doctor, they checked my iron levels and they were through the floor. They were terrible. It's really, really hard to get iron on a vegetarian diet. The amount of legumes, the amount of lentils, and when you're pregnant and you're nauseous, I just couldn't do it. And every time I go, she would say, can you just give it a go? I saw a dietitian. We came up with all these ideas. I took the supplements. Nothing worked. It turned out that my body, it just wasn't absorbing it. And even now, I'm eating red meat probably 3 times a week. My iron levels are barely where they should be.
How did it feel when you had to change this whole quite important thing about yourself?
I mean, I was very conscious when I cut meat out to not make a big deal out of it. I didn't really advertise it. I didn't want to make it part of my identity or anything like that because I'm aware that things change and our bodies change and how we feel about things changes all the time. So I didn't want to make it part of my identity. I think if I'd done that, it would have been a lot harder for me to change. I do remember going out though and having meat the first time in quite a while. And I went out and had Vietnamese. I had a beef pho. It was so good. It was delicious. And everyone was like, oh, do you hate meat? Now I was like, no, I genuinely still think it's delicious and I've always thought it was delicious and I've always enjoyed eating it. And maybe that's why it was easier because even when I wasn't eating meat, I still really appreciated that I would see people eating meat and be like, I know that is an animal and that doesn't align with my values right now, but I still think that looks delicious.
Unfortunately, tragically for all involved.
Yeah.
Madison Burke became a vegetarian at 13 and a vegan not too long after that. Eventually, doing a lot of travel in recent years, she found the vegan options overseas were just too limited for her and reintroduced fish into her diet. It wasn't until she moved to Newcastle and became a gym girly that she changed her diet altogether.
I guess the vegan diet, when done correctly, can be a great diet for some people. However, being a woman and being a gym girly, there's a few extra nutrients that you kind of have to try and get in your body to make sure that you're recovering correctly and building muscle correctly. It's definitely made my recovery and my muscle building a hell of a lot easier. I still eat a very vegan influenced diet in the sense that I haven't lowered my fruit or vegetable intake, but I've absolutely introduced a bunch of new foods and I can feel the benefits from it for sure.
Forrest Nash, yes, that is his real name, works as a certified personal trainer in Australia and the US. And his specialty is helping people meet their fitness and muscle growth goals while maintaining vegan or plant-based diets.
When it comes to building muscle, there are a few key components. One, obviously, is the training side of things. So doing resistance training is going to be very important there. But that's true for anyone, regardless of whatever kind of diet you're following. And then within the diet side of things, looking at like a vegan or plant-based diet specifically, the key components that are going to really help with any kind of muscle building goal are, one, making sure you're actually consuming enough calories to build muscle. So being in a calorie surplus is what works best. So you actually gain a little bit of weight gradually over time, and that's what supports that muscle gain to occur. And then getting enough protein in is also important. It's of secondary importance to your overall calorie intake. So if you're eating plenty of protein, but there's not enough calories coming in, you're still probably not going to gain much muscle. So I think that's kind of the question or the issue that sometimes people wonder about or maybe are skeptical of when it comes to plant-based diets is how do you get that protein in that's necessary to gain muscle? And it might also be kind of a question mark of can you actually get the necessary protein to build muscle on a plant-based diet? And the answer to that is yes, of course. But if you don't know how to go about it or it's unfamiliar to you, it can seem a little bit daunting. So plant-based protein sources that I often will include in my own diet and recommend to people are things like, legumes, beans, split peas, chickpeas, lentils, things of that nature are quite high in protein. They're super health promoting as well. So they're great to include in your diet. And then also some soy products like tofu, tempeh, soy milk, things of that nature are really good protein sources as well. The evidence is actually very clear that moderate soy consumption is actually fine for health and health promoting in many areas and doesn't have any negative effect on hormone levels. It's not going to give you man boobs or anything like that. And then there are other foods that we can include just for convenience, like, plant-based protein powders. There are lots of those out there nowadays. But for the most part, I source the majority of my protein from whole foods, and I get about 190 grams of protein per day on my vegan diet. So I certainly do not have any difficulty kind of meeting my protein targets there to build muscle.
Advanced accredited practicing dietitian Gemma O'Hanlon says it's pretty common for her clients to try vegan or plant-based diets, but reintroduce some meat or dairy after a while.
Very common. I think people get motivated. I mean, we're coming up to the new year now. People are getting ready for that transformation of their diet. And I think, though, sometimes we go on these eating patterns and then when they're too restrictive or they don't allow us to just kind of enjoy a bit of cake without worrying whether it's vegan or not, I think sometimes reality hits and people kind of go, actually, this is really, really tough. Or they feel that social stigma. And I certainly felt that when I was on a vegan diet. They say that if you're a vegan, people will know about it. And it's actually, for me, it wasn't me preaching to the world that I was vegan. It was simply a fact that when you're at a restaurant, you're sitting down there with all your friends, the waiters will come around and they're doing the right thing, but they have to acknowledge your dietary need. And so it then creates conversation. People who are eating meat feel a bit uncomfortable because they might feel you're judging them, and it can create a little bit of tension there in the social dynamic. So I think for me that was another sort of moment where I thought, is this really worth it? I really enjoy, just having that social fun with my friends, and I could still do that now on a pescatarian diet. For me, it was also, I love animals. I've got 2 dogs that I love dearly. I grew up riding horses. I'm an animal lover. So I don't want to think about eating animals. And so for me, it was a choice to be doing that from an animal welfare perspective. But gosh, it does create that tension in your mind because when you do choose to then introduce animal products back, you've got that moral dilemma that's going through your mind. And it is challenging. So I think everyone has different values and different personal preferences and things that they believe in. And look, I think it's a really personal decision at the end of the day. But as a dietitian, I would also say vegan diets can, if they're not planned out well, they can actually do more harm than good. We can become quite deficient in certain nutrients like iron, like vitamin B12, which if you're not having that through fortified foods, you actually do need to take a supplement for vitamin B12. That affects the brain, so that's really important to keep on top of. There's many other nutrients, zinc, iodine, even protein, is obviously harder to achieve through a vegan diet. So I think we've got to be careful that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and kind of do ourselves a disservice. And I always recommend, if you are looking to go on a plant-based diet or, transform your health, see an accredited practicing dietitian, because they're the experts and they can help you actually plan it and get that correct nutritional balance.
We discussed some of the challenges that people have maintaining a vegan diet and building muscle or gaining fitness. Do you ever find clients just tell you, I can't do it anymore?
Yeah, I would say it's rare in my experience to have a client where maybe they're like attempting to eat a plant-based diet and then they just literally feel like they can't do it anymore. Some folks may find that what works best for them is to have a little bit more flexibility, and that's okay. Like, you don't have to be 100% all or nothing. Like, you could eat more plant-based foods. You could be vegetarian or kind of flexitarian without being 100% vegan. And there's still a lot of benefits to be had from that. But to the extent that you can get in more whole plant foods and fewer animal products, it is going to have a lot of benefits for your health and, of course, for the environment and the animals as well. But another thing I will say is it can be really helpful actually to keep track of your diet. So using a free app, there's lots of them out there nowadays that let you do this. MyFitnessPal and Chronometer are two really popular ones that I often use with my clients. And what this does is it will allow you to plug in your food that you're eating on a daily basis. You don't have to do it all the time, but you could do a few days just to get a snapshot of what your diet looks like. And that will actually tell you then how many calories you're getting in, as well as how many grams of macronutrients like protein and micronutrients like iron as well. So you can start to see what your dietary pattern actually looks like, and then you can modify it. You can eat more of certain foods if you need to in order to make sure that you're hitting your nutrient targets for those nutrients like protein or iron that sometimes people find challenging to get enough of.
I asked dietitian Gemma O'Hanlon what is her best advice for someone trying to maintain a vegan diet if they're struggling.
Number one, see a dietitian, get that expert advice. Number two, I think go back to basics, focus on those whole foods. I think another thing that often happens is they'll see the supermarket, you walk into the health food aisle. It shouldn't be called the health food aisle, let me say as well. It should be called the therapeutic diet aisle, because, gluten-free doesn't mean it's healthy. Vegan doesn't mean it's healthy. There's a lot of ultra-processed foods out there that are really unhealthy. Like some of these vegan cheeses out there, my goodness, they're packed with saturated fat, they're packed with coconut oil and all sorts of additives. Go back to basics. All your fruit, fresh fruits, dried fruit even, or fruit juice, vegetable juice, no worries. Vegetables, load up on those vegetables, all that beautiful fiber. Eat a rainbow, all those colors is king. Nuts, all those healthy fats. We know these days that healthy fats actually lower our cholesterol and are good for us. So avocado, nuts and seeds, and legumes. It's so easy. A can of baked beans on toast, can be a great easy lunch or dinner even. I mean, you don't have to be a master chef and whip up something fantastic. So go back to basics and stick to whole foods would be my advice.
Advanced accredited practicing dietitian Gemma O'Hanlon there. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. Before you go though, we'd love it if you could share this app with someone you think might be interested or enjoy it. It's an easy way to support us and all we do here at The Briefing. So is sharing and engaging with our social posts. Check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and on TikTok and YouTube. Search Listener Newsroom. We'll have another episode for you at 6 tomorrow morning. I'm Bension Siebert. Catch you next time.
Listener.